Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, July 16th, 2020. Time for yet another show, and it's a Thursday at that. So one more shot at hearing the news. Some of it doom and gloom. Some of it gloom and doom, I guess, probably. And maybe some other interesting things thrown in there from Greg Dworkin coming up later on. And we'll see if we can't give you a few stories to reflect on as well. It's another big day of, oh my gosh, I just don't know what to point at first. Seems the president spent most of yesterday continuously violating the law as usual. Par for the course. And I guess once again we'll just fill out a troubleshooting ticket with the help desk and file it along with everything else. I guess, like with everything else, he spent all of his time on official events holding forth on campaign-related themes, which may or may not have anything to do with the fact that Brad Parscale was actually, I guess what passes for being fired as campaign manager and replaced with, what's his name, Bill Stepien, who comes out of, he's a longtime Republican operative, I guess last and best known for working with Chris Christie and getting involved in his whole Bridgegate scenario. So an interesting pick, to say the least. Interesting that he would have come through as the replacement. Rumors are flying, so the stories are just solidifying now about whether or not it was a true firing. He's, of course, they put the window dressing on. We're reassigning you to some other thing, and he'll still be in charge of the data operation. Allegedly, the firing news delivered, though, by Jared Kushner, which can be no comfort, I think, to Trump-supporting Republicans who have kind of been rolling their eyes at how the campaign and everything else has been going off the rails lately, that Jared should step in and take charge or hand over the pink slip here. Can't be all that interesting. And then, of course, weird that the replacement would come out of Chris Christie world if Jared had anything to do with elbowing Parscale out. It's never clear what's going on internally there. And I guess the best guide we have is to assume that everything that they say about it is a lie and that the opposite is actually true. We'll see whether that holds and can give us any guidance today. I know Greg has put together, it looks like a tremendous number of items today. I haven't taken a look to see how many of them are pictures, whether he's giving me a briefing book like the president or whether I've got actually that many items here. We've got some 40-something items lined up for today, although a lot of them are comments on the articles that he sent along. And plenty of pictures, so we'll all be entertained, I'm sure. And even if we can't read the thing, we'll enjoy looking at the flickering pictures and the graphs and the various lines going in different directions, telling us many things. Many things. I feel like the president now giving a briefing. There'll be a lot of things. Many of them will be interesting. Let's see. I don't know what grabs my attention tops this morning. I got distracted and bogged down in reading a rather lengthy article that surprised me. Maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe it'll be among Greg's collection of articles. I don't know. But it had, it's a Politico piece. I'll just mention the title and we'll tease it for later. Alyssa Slotkin is sounding the alarm. Will Democrats listen? And I kind of rolled my eyes because I'm used to seeing those headlines heralding a story about how Democrats really needed to be running a campaign, not talking about Donald Trump at all, and focusing on kitchen table issues and jobs and healthcare, which are people's top priorities. And I wondered, would I have the stomach to read this in the middle of the pandemic fail and everything else that demands so much more attention? But as I read through it, I was surprised to see that it might be leading to a very different conclusion. So maybe we'll get a chance to thumb through that, or maybe it's already on Greg's list. I don't know. We can ask Greg. I don't know how we would do that exactly. I'll see if I can think of a way to communicate with him and ask him that question.
Well,
hey, Greg.
I'm sending you coloring books. I figure it's a good way to communicate.
Yeah, coloring books? Is that among them?
So what are the least likely conclusion there? That's
well,
one
I
I didn't have in my
conclusion.
40-odd list.
Okay. But it seems like, this was so formulaic. Alyssa Slotkin is sounding the alarm. Will Democrats listen? Subheader,
Democrats
she helped
in disarray.
Yeah, right.
What now?
She helped win Congress for the Democrats in 2018. Now she has a warning for her party. It's Politico. I figured, watch out. Yep. Don't campaign against Donald Trump. You're going to have to hug him tight or something dumb like that. But the whole thing actually so far appears to be about her background as a intelligence analyst. Mm-hmm. And how she won a district that had gone for Trump, and how she did so by running a hyper-local campaign focusing on kitchen table issues, but that she's basically reached the conclusion Trump is so crazy dangerous to our national security, I'm just going to have to come out and say, hey, look, man, I'm a CIA analyst, and this guy is working for the other team, and that might cost me the election, but I kind of have to tell people. And I thought, wow, okay, let's read. And so we will later, because there's a set play we have ready to go. But we can keep this in the back of our minds and see if this feeds into the rest of the narrative you've arranged for us by watching what the narrative actually is and saying, that might be interesting. And this part of it is baloney. So, okay, what's up this morning?
The question on the table always is, you want to do pandemic or politics first?
Yes, I do.
So let's do politics first.
Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Why not?
The overall overarching big theory here is, of course, Trump is in big trouble, and a slew of polls help to explain why. Yeah. But Greg Sargent has an interesting take here, which also merges with the pandemic. He says, as the Trump disaster gets worse, a new political theory helps to explain it. Right? It isn't just that he's incompetent. There's a more coherent narrative, he writes, of Trumpian failure, one that undermines the shallow understanding of these impulses and traits as necessarily in conflict. The paper offers a theory of, quote, executive underreach. You've heard about executive overreach?
Yeah.
This is deliberate executive underreach. And it applies to leaders like Trump and Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil. Both have failed on coronavirus through indifference to mass suffering and abdication of leadership in the face of it. Basically, instead of trying to do anything about it, they try to dazzle you with bullshit and and try to claim that like nothing's really going on. Yeah. Mike Pence is a practitioner, but it turns out so is Ron DeSantis, Brian Kemp, Ducey in Arizona, Abbott in Texas. All of them first try to claim nothing's going on, and then when locals, usually Democrats in cities, try to do something about it, mandate masks or something like that, the governor overrides them and says, no, you can't do that locally. Brian Kemp is the latest. He did that yesterday.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they're actively taking steps to try to make the pandemic less scary.
That's good. Yes.
But not actually doing anything about the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, as Derek Thompson pointed out,
generous.
The pandemic is the economy and the economy is the pandemic. You can't fix the economy without fixing the pandemic, and that's true for school opening and everything else.
Yeah.
But their approach is masks are scary, and so if you wear them, you're basically saying that my approach 3 weeks ago was wrong, so I will not allow it.
Yes. Okay. That makes more sense. Yeah. It seems almost generous to say that, well, what they're trying to do is make things less scary for Americans. I don't think that's your intent.
Well, that makes it go away. It's not that, we only have fear itself to fear. It's that, no, that's what you think is going on isn't really going on. Don't
fear,
look.
We have nothing to fear but the fear of fear itself.
Right.
This is new.
We typically associate such impulses, Greg Sargent writes, with executive overreach. But this is especially true amid emergency or crisis conditions, such as a pandemic, which prompts fears that a leader will seize on them to consolidate power, like Viktor Orban did in Hungary. But the paper argues association risks blinding us to deliberate executive underreach in the face of public emergencies as its own form of anti-democratic and reactionary governance. Both Trump and Bolsonaro have defended their underreach by appealing to populist themes and attacking the legitimacy of domestic and international public health institutions. Both have tried to compensate for or distract from their failures by manipulating the truth, denouncing the media, and threatening to overreach on other margins, like compelling states to reopen or pushing schools to reopen. Okay, so the executive is endowed with the discretion to opt for inaction. So defining executive underreach isn't easy. But underreach occurs, suggesting in this case, when domestic and international legal sources are widely seen to authorize, if not encourage or oblige, an executive to tackle a particular sort of problem with particular sort of tools, but the executive declines to do so. All you need to do, says the federal government to the states, is wear masks. And so the governors say, okay, great, I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm going to stop you from doing that.
Yeah. Huh.
So that's an active executive underreach. Very interesting theory. And it is in contrast with, Trump is an authoritarian, but luckily he's too incompetent to be able to fulfill his desires. Actually, he is fulfilling his desires. He's just doing it in a more subtle way, so that people don't call him out quite the same way. So very interesting. And how is it playing? It's playing terribly.
Oh.
Okay.
Well,
none of this is actually working. So let's give you an idea. All right. We talked about Trump and some of the governors, the Republican governors, who are basically trying to follow the Trumpian model. Mm-hmm. All right. But let's talk about one that isn't, and that's Larry Hogan.
Yes. Okay.
Larry Hogan has a big op-ed today about how Trump screwed us.
Yeah. I saw 3 people doing the same as you, saying, this is a must-read.
Fighting alone. I'm a GOP governor. Why didn't Trump help my state with coronavirus testing? And he talks about how he had to turn to South Korea because his wife is South Korean, and they talked to the South Korean president, and they purchased their own kits back in the day when things were locked down and the federal government was stealing supplies from everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know if we ever got to the point where it was Jared trying to resell it and make a buck, but whatever. So Larry Hogan contracted with South Korea for a bunch of testing kits and then used his National Guard to protect them from the federal government so that they wouldn't steal it, if people forgot that story.
I had not, but...
the federal government had recently seized 3 million N95 masks purchased by Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. Yeah. We weren't going to let Washington stop us from helping Marylanders. Now, this shouldn't have been necessary. And then he goes on to say, I'd watched as the president downplayed the outbreak severity and as the White House failed to issue public warnings, draw up a 50-state strategy, or dispatch medical gear or life-saving ventilators from the national stockpile to American hospitals. Eventually, it was clear that waiting around for the president, remember, this is a Republican governor and the head of the National Governors Association right now. Eventually, it was clear that waiting around for the president to run the nation's response was hopeless. If we delayed any longer, we'd be condemning more of our citizens to suffering and death. So every governor went their own way, which is how the U.S. ended up with such a patchwork response. I did the best I could for Maryland. Here's what we saw and heard from Washington along the way. And then goes ahead and catalogs everything Trump did wrong. It's a pretty amazing op-ed.
All right. Yeah, I saw a lot of people reacted to it, as strongly as you did. And so now we have read it, now that it's a must-read.
Yeah. Okay, so what's happening? Well, what's happening in the country, of course, is bad stuff. But let's get back to the politics of it. So you in effect have a Republican governor breaking from Trump in a big way.
Yeah. In
ways that the Senate is afraid to.
True also, yes.
Okay. And by the way, it's just coincidence. It is just coincidence that particular op-ed appears the day after an incredible blitz of polling comes out. Yes. All of it bad for Trump. Right. So let's go through some of that.
They asked people's opinions, and those are bad. Those are bad for Trump. Opinions are horrible.
Right.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening at home, I hope you heard what David said. I'm doing my best not to talk over him because people like to hear what he has to say.
It's the opposite.
When I try to keep talking and make David shut up, he doesn't. So, I have
It's
to
very
let him talk.
awkward. It's hard to do.
Hint, hint.
10 things I've been like,
David and I have been friends for longer than I care to admit, and we've been doing this forever, so you just have to get used to us. So, Mark Murray.
Yes.
The major headlines from our new NBC News Wall Street poll. 1. Biden leads Trump nationally by 11 points among registered voters. Biden 51, Trump 40. Note that Biden's over 50. It was Biden 49, Trump 42 last month.
But over 50 now.
Okay. Trump's ratings are down.
Yes.
Overall approval, 42-56, was 45-53. Coronavirus handling, 37-59, was 43-55. Race relations, 33-63.
Yeah. What, they didn't
now,
ask about
his
that
economic
before?
handling is 54-42, but Biden's ahead on economic handling in this poll.
Oh.
By about 5 points.
Yes, I guess that can happen.
All right. 72% believe the country's on the wrong track. Only 19% headed in the right direction. Okay. And the 72% wrong track is the highest number on this question since July 2016.
Okay. Whole presidency.
Right. And remember, Trump's an incumbent. Then, of course, you have to have Democrats in disarray because it's such a bad poll for Trump. So what they throw in is a warning signs for Biden.
Okay.
Positive, negative is 34-46. And Trump's favorable, unfavorable is 39-54. So the positive view for Biden is less than the fave, unfave for Trump. And so therefore it's a warning sign for Biden. But, again, people don't seem to understand or grasp that they're not voting for Biden. They're voting against Trump. And that's why Trump is getting trounced in this poll.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that is the key thing. And in fact, I don't know if it's in this poll or other polls, but if you hate both, Trump is losing something like 67-4.
Oh.
I mean, if you don't like either one, it doesn't matter.
Okay. We're doing best
really
among
doesn't
people
matter,
who don't like
right?
us.
And voters want politicians to focus on the coronavirus, not reopenings. Would you be more likely to vote for a congressional candidate who focuses more on reopening business, 25, focuses more on controlling the spread of the virus, 57.
Okay. Simple.
So that part is pretty clear. And by the way, that's not the only poll that came out yesterday. The Q poll also came out.
Not.
And that was even worse for Trump.
All right.
Okay, Biden leads
Q.
Trump 52-37 nationally.
Yes.
That's 15 points.
All right.
And by 14 among seniors.
Oh, all right. That's
right?
new too.
That's pretty bad. 37% of voters say Trump cares about average Americans. Biden gets 59.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
2/3 of the U.S. trust Fauci on COVID, while 2/3 do not trust Trump, which is why Trump is backing off and attacking Fauci. It's not helping him politically.
Yeah, that's another of our stories. They straightened that out. Or maybe. Right. You were right.
There are a few records in this poll, says my friend Brandon, who's following this on Twitter. Brandon is a former conservative who we met on the Romulan neutral zone of Twitter polling. We always exchange polls back and forth. So I like to follow him. And he says there's a few records in this poll. 34-61 favorable rating ties a record low in the Q poll. 31-65 approval rating on race relations, a record low. 66% say he's dishonest, a record high. Good. 37% say he cares about people like them, a record low. And 56% say very dissatisfied with the direction of the nation, record high. And by the way, I would point out in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, a bit of a more conservative in the classic sense, doesn't rush to conclusions, doesn't vary tremendously. 50% say in no way, shape, or form will they ever vote for Donald Trump.
That should technically do the trick.
37% for Biden.
Okay.
So that gives you an idea of Trump's true base. His true base is 37.
So for now, until it collapses further and Brad Parscale gets his job back or something.
Right.
All right.
So in this
record-breaking polls.
In this record-breaking poll, I'm trying to find it because this particular site that I was reading from actually changes things, but I think I may have written it for you. Tim Malloy, who is the Quinnipiac poll director, had some comments to make about the poll. He says, for the first time in Quinnipiac polling, a majority of Americans, 53%, have either been or personally know somebody who has been infected by the coronavirus.
Okay, yeah, I had. Is that the first
so that's
time
going to
majority,
affect
really?
things a lot.
Okay.
And he also goes on to say there's basically no silver lining. There's no good news in this poll for Donald Trump. Unlike the NBC Wall Street Journal
fake.
poll, which at least can find, well, people aren't in love with Biden as if it matters, which it doesn't. He's generic Democrat. Mm-hmm. In this particular poll, the poll directors say, I'd like to tell you something positive for Donald Trump. There's nothing. We went through everything. There's nothing there.
Okay. They were trying to both sides.
Now, you may recall,
couldn't be done.
Let me give you some more polling just to give you a sense of just how ubiquitous this is. Joni Ernst had an interesting finding. Ann Seltzer did an over 50 poll. If you're over 50, how do you feel about how things are going for AARP? And Joni Ernst, the Republican senator from Iowa, this is an Iowa poll, has a 42-53 job approval with 50 plus age, 50 years plus
That's
voters.
And
so
we
seniors
them,
have
right?
soured on Joni Ernst. Gives you an idea of how the Republican brand is doing overall. In Monmouth, in Pennsylvania, Biden leads by 13. Many in Pennsylvania anticipate a secret Trump vote. It doesn't exist, but that's okay. Sure. It keeps the question, well, who do you think is going to win 50-50, even though Biden leads by 13?
Okay, so people...
Larry Sabato pointed out, we were talking about this. This is still 2016 PTSD, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Because Nate Cohn has a good commentary on that. And Larry Sabato said, it's okay. It's a good thing. It'll keep Democrats from being overconfident.
All right.
They still think there's a secret Trump vote that doesn't exist, and if they act that way and still act as if it's a close race, that's fine. It satisfies all the people that say, run like you're 10 points down, which is ridiculous because you want to run like you're 1 point down. You don't want to run like you're going to lose. You want to run like you're going to come from behind and win.
Run like you're a yard sign.
I like to say, run like you're a point ahead. Not enough to feel confident, but enough to say, okay, I'm winning.
Okay.
You get that bounce in your step. You get that, arrogant, I'm going to win this thing, which Republicans share regardless of whether or not they are. And Democrats never have, even when they're 13 points ahead. It's just, it's in our DNA. So act like you're a point ahead. Okay. So there's that. But more from the Q poll. Voters back Biden over President Trump, 52-37, as we talked about. And here's the comment. Right?
Yes.
While things can drastically change in the next 16 weeks, this is a very unpleasant real-time look at Trump's probable future, Quinnipiac University polling analyst Tim Loy says. Past polls have typically given Trump an advantage in one way or another or revealed a group of voters he could potentially turn the tides with. But this time, quote, there is no upside, no silver lining, no encouraging friend hidden somewhere in this survey for the president. Trend. No encouraging trend. He has no friends. You know that.
Metaphorical, but okay, yeah.
Right.
Well, nothing that ends in END.
Right. And more, Change Research came out with a bunch of swing state polls yesterday as well. And by the way, in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, I think they have a section on battleground states, which semi-useless, but Biden's way ahead there too. But in the individual states, Wisconsin, Biden +6, Pennsylvania, Biden +8, North Carolina, Biden +1, Michigan, Biden +6, Florida, Biden +7, Arizona, Biden +6, and overall Biden +10 if you're looking at national numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. So Nate Cohn says, look, even if the polls are really off, Trump is still in trouble, and just goes through all the mistakes that were made in 2016 with polling, how they're not being made this time. And even if they are, it doesn't really matter because he's so far ahead. He's just plain winning.
All right.
Right?
Yes.
We have, just like that Joni Ernst poll in Iowa, we have micro data that kind of support the same thing. This is Harry Enton. An interesting GOP internal poll at Pennsylvania won. Their GOP candidate, Fitzpatrick, is up.
Yes.
But Biden is up by 9.
Oh.
In the same poll. Fitzpatrick released it to say, Trump is not dragging me down. But
Okay,
Pennsylvania
I
one
see.
basically mirrored the presidential national vote in 16. And in this poll, instead of being ahead by 2,
Yeah.
Biden's up by 9.
Yeah.
So it gives you an
So,
idea overall how
right.
things are going. So the
Fitzpatrick
fact of the
gets
matter is,
yeah.
Trump is getting skunked, and that's why he fired Brad Parscale last night.
Habitual thing
Yeah.
for Trump.
Steinbrenner fires Billy Martin in an attempt to change the Yankees' fortune. News at 11. You always fire the manager.
Right, sure.
The team
Even when
isn't
he's
doing
dead.
well,
Right.
because you can't fire the team.
Yeah.
So
that's
Bill
true.
Stepien will step in, as you pointed out. He's the guy that was involved in the Bridgegate scandal with Christie, and Christie fired him.
Yeah.
He's
So
another
used to it.
everything Trump touches dies. It'll be the end of his political career after this.
Awesome.
Because there's only 4 months left, okay? And you can't make people
Still so long.
hate Biden as much as people hate Trump, because that takes decades.
He's been working on it for a long time.
Yeah, I'm from New York, I know. I mean, so you can't do it that fast. And they took 30 years for them to do the Clintons.
Yeah. That's true. It's a
Can't do
long-term
it
project.
in 6 weeks. They're going to start voting.
He's been around long enough. It's just that nobody, the demonizing Biden, it wasn't a thing ever until, people. He did things that angered people, but yeah, no, they don't have enough time and to make up that much ground. If it was closer, maybe, but it's since it's so far looking like a blowout, they got some work ahead of them.
Right. So it is
They'll
looking
try
like a
very
blowout,
hard.
but luckily people don't believe it, and so they're going to work as if it's not, and that's just fine, and that's what makes it a blowout.
Okay. Well, we can accept that, and
And we'll talk about individual states from the Economist prediction, which has Biden 91% winning. Well, we'll talk which
Okay.
states are stronger and which states are not.
okay. Well, that'll be coming up after our 2-minute break, and I guess their only hope is to, I don't know, maybe they'll build a Death Star or something like that, and they'll be able to do this. This was the least dramatic Death Star commanding officer firing I've ever seen, and I've seen a few on film, so we'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Okay. Woo. Welcome back to the show here. I choked at like the last second there. I was getting all
don't
set
do
to...
that.
All ready to come
Probably
back.
Death Star stuff. I was just, doing my hand grab just because of
Okay.
Brad Parscale, and I probably got your throat. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that
about
must be it, right? Darth Vader's doing something. All of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, I better take a sip of water and drown in my chair." So I didn't think through. Well, what are the consequences of doing that on the air? Now you
Right.
know.
So let's take a look
Yes.
at this forecasting model
Wow,
from The
okay.
Economist. Is that included in my long list of things? Even if it is, let me
How
just
would
put
I
it
know?
at the
It's too
bottom
long,
so it's
yeah.
easier for you to find. Oh, at the bottom there's a picture. Remember we were doing pictures?
Yes.
So one of the pictures that I sent you is Gallup. And
Yes.
Gallup has American Party affiliation 2020.
Yes. Oh, we're all
Let me give you some numbers here. Back in January, 47% said they were Republicans and 45% said Democrats at the beginning of this year, calendar year.
this year, right
Okay.
before the pandemic. Okay.
And then in March, it was 45-43, flipping to Democrats,
Pandemic.
right?
Impeachment.
47-44 in April, 47-44 in May, and now 50% Democrat, 39% Republican.
Okay. That seems like the reverse. That's
Like nobody wants to be a Republican now.
Yeah. Well, they've gone through a time.
So, in terms of looking at the election, I mentioned that Joe Biden has a 91% chance of winning and Trump 9%, or as Han Solo likes to say, never tell me the odds. But what I want to look at here is I'll give you some states, all right? I'll give you some of the competitive states.
Hawaii.
And we'll guess before looking at the numbers, or you can look at the numbers and pretend you're guessing.
All right. Let's cheat.
Which ones are the most competitive?
For
example, let's take a look at Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. The blue wall trio in the Midwest.
Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan.
So Michigan is the most competitive, you think, of those three?
Most competitive. Michigan.
Or least competitive.
Okay. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Sure. Is that wrong? Is that
Your answer is
yes. Yes.
Which one is the most competitive?
I don't.
Of the three, which one is the hardest one for Biden to win?
Oh, hardest for Biden to win. All right. Michigan. Sure.
Michigan? Okay.
Why not?
So why not?
So
Biden, Michigan, 89% chance to win. Donald Trump, 11.
Okay.
Wisconsin, 85% Biden, 15% Trump. So Biden has an ever so slightly harder chance in Wisconsin.
Sure. It's like going to Czechoslovakia.
And Pennsylvania, 84-16. So according to The Economist, actually Pennsylvania is the most difficult one for Biden to win, which actually tracks with the polls. Michigan has had some blowout polls, and Wisconsin's trending surprisingly Democratic. Plus, we had that recent election where a Supreme Court judge was elected on the Democratic side.
Yes, right.
Pennsylvania has no such reassuring numbers, and a lot of the polls have been a lot closer up until this moment when Monmouth said Pennsylvania plus 13. So it's of interest, but all of them are trending Biden. Let's give you another couple that I've been struggling with.
All right.
Okay. Let's look at Arizona versus North Carolina.
All right. This is like the NCAA.
Which one is easier for Biden to win? Because they're both Trump states. They're both recently red states.
Yeah.
Now, sure, Obama won, but typically North Carolina is a very stubborn red state that's tough for Democrats to win.
Yeah.
And Arizona, especially.
Right. Used to be
so
just
which one is more competitive? Which one is easier for Biden to win?
Arizona.
Arizona. That's what I would have guessed too. Oh. North Carolina is just so stubborn. Arizona, let's see. Biden's 62-38 chance of winning.
Okay.
And North Carolina is 64-36. That's because close. Obama was able to win, and this model takes into account previous elections, it gives the slight edge to North Carolina. I would have done it the other way, just like you.
Okay.
I would have agreed with you.
All right. I just lately.
Now let's take another trio here. Let's do Georgia, Iowa, and Ohio.
Georgia, Iowa, Ohio. Okay.
Which one's easier for Biden to win?
Georgia. I just said it. Georgia, what? Ohio, and Iowa. Easiest for Biden to win.
Yeah. Trouble in River City, or the Kentucky part of Ohio, or Brian Kemp in Georgia.
Man. Iowa.
Okay. So Iowa.
Why not? Yeah.
Trump has the lead 64-36. This particular model just does not see Iowa farmers who are being subsidized by the Trump administration. Yes. This is off the radar, but Trump is paying them to be loyal.
Right. We're forgetting this.
So Iowa 64 for Trump and 36 for Biden. So let's look at Georgia now.
What am I picking again? Oh, yeah. Okay.
The forecast
gives
Biden a 51-49 chance in Georgia.
Really? Yeah. All right.
And Ohio is 50-50.
Okay. It's always supposed to be.
right? So even though at times Democrats have won Iowa, Iowa just seems to be too rural for this model to really accept that Biden is competitive there. Whereas Georgia and Ohio are like 50-50.
Yeah.
So
Ohio
if you're going to be Joe Biden and you got to make a decision where you're going to spend your money.
Yeah, where?
Iowa's cheap.
True. And Joni Ernst is doing
But Georgia and Ohio make a whole lot more sense than Texas.
Okay.
Even though recent polls have made Texas look close, Donald Trump has a 71% chance of winning Texas and 29% Biden. So Biden is, buying an ad or two there. But when you all start getting mad at Biden for not going all in on Texas, this is why. The money's much better spent in Ohio, all right?
Yeah.
And, and places like that. And Georgia. If you're going to spend money and you're Biden, you want to expand the map, you do it in those two states. Texas is last.
Yeah, okay. We're already getting mad. She didn't campaign in Wisconsin. He's not advertising in Texas.
Well, he has, but not very much.
Okay.
Florida, by the way, is 79-21 Biden. Why is that important? Because if Trump loses Florida, he loses the election.
Oh, well, let's just do that then.
Yeah. So, just to put all of this in perspective in terms of how the election is going. That's why the polls were just so bad for Trump yesterday. So bad that he actually had to fire Billy Martin. That's how bad it was.
Right. Well, that's what Billy Martin is around for. Except he's not around.
Exactly. So they'll probably hire. They didn't get rid of him. They just demoted him.
Sure.
And that's so they could fire him again.
It was a promotion. Yeah, I guess so. They can fire him from everything. It was very interesting. By the way, Dana Houle predicted the end date.
The exact date, the exact time.
He said, right. He did say, what did he say? I'll be shocked or surprised.
I'd be shocked if by the 15th, Pascal isn't gone.
Yeah, and then it was on the 15th.
And it was on the 15th.
It was that close to being wrong, but now it looks fantastic. So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, a couple of hours and he will look like an idiot. I wasn't out for that or anything.
All right, so let's look at the bigger picture here. Yes. Sometimes you can get lost in the numbers, but the bigger picture, as David Frum put it, is that basically you've heard about it. It's a cliche, but this pandemic is Trump's Katrina, and what I mean by that is that people have simply lost faith, and they've said, he can't do it. Forget it. I'm done. And whether it's focus groups or whether it's polling, people have just looked at him and said, you're not doing the job. I don't think you can do the job. And so the bigger picture is basically you're not really good at your job. I think I'm going to vote for somebody else.
All right. Yeah, well, that tends to color people's voting behavior.
Right, and that's what we're seeing in all of this. So you can look at the micro stuff, you can look at the macro stuff. It's all leading to the same place. And what's pushing us there? The pandemic, of course. This is an article in The Atlantic about a topic we've been talking about for a long time. A second coronavirus death surge is coming. There was always a logical explanation for why cases rose to the end of June while deaths did not. Basically, despite political leaders trivializing the pandemic, deaths are rising. The 7-day average for deaths per day has now jumped by more than 200 since July 6th, according to data compiled by the COVID Tracking Project at The Atlantic. And more to say about that particular project in a moment. By our count, states reported 855 deaths today, in line with the recent elevated numbers in mid-July. The deaths aren't happening in unpredictable places. Rather, people are dying at higher rates where there are lots of cases. In Florida, Arizona, Texas, and California, as well as a host of smaller southern states that all rushed to open up. We've been following those big four for a while, as you know. The deaths are not happening in an unpredictable amount of time. Okay? 21 days after cases rose, states began to report more deaths. There's a 3-week lag.
All right.
Assuming you're getting accurate data. Arizona reports their deaths like 38 days after it happens.
Okay.
Whereas Florida reports them right away. I mean, it just so the differences between states is a factor here. But on average, you're talking about 3 weeks.
Okay.
And by the way, that's the exact number of days that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had estimated from the onset of symptoms to the reporting of death. It's about 3 weeks.
Oh. Well, they were right.
Okay. So many people who don't want this to be the terrible crisis that it is have clung to the idea that more cases won't mean more deaths. Some Americans have been perplexed by a downward trend of national deaths, even as cases exploded in the Sun Belt. But given the policy choices that state and federal officials have made, the virus has done exactly what public health experts expected when states reopened in late April and May with plenty of infected people within the borders. Cases began to grow. It's highly transmissible, probably airborne to some extent, makes a large subset of people who catch it seriously ill, and kills many more people than the flu circulating in the country. So that's what's going on here.
Okay.
Now,
that is true.
We talked about the fact yesterday that there's this problem with reporting, that the CDC is getting cut out of the reporting information. And I said yesterday on the show, it's not quite as bad as it seems because a lot of people don't even use CDC for this, but there are aspects of this that are important. The COVID tracking project, which is an Atlantic magazine thing. Sometimes you get the feeling it's like official or CDC or Johns Hopkins. It's not. It's volunteers at the Atlantic that are doing all of this. They said, if you've seen the news that the federal government has rerouted hospital data into a new system at HHS, we do not think that our state-based data compilation will be affected by the change. So if you're using COVID tracking project, not CDC, to figure out what's going on, it's not going to be any different. And that's good news.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see whether that holds true. And you get an immediate test because people are already tweeting that the hospital capacity numbers at CDC are gone.
Yeah.
They're no longer on the website.
They disappeared as of the 10th. That's when they made this change.
Okay.
And again, CDC usually lagged a week anyway to report anything. But here's an epidemiologist who's reporting on this. And I got some... at the top of the piece, I put in a glossary because there's so many alphabets. Don't forget it's Washington.
Oh, okay. Yes, right.
That sometimes you need to have the glossary to really figure out what's going on. And let's scroll all the way up so where I can actually find where I put it. It's a different story altogether.
I got it.
But here, we got the National Healthcare Safety Network, or NHSN, and that's the hospitalizations and ICU data that's fit to CDC that's now missing.
Okay.
There's APIC, APIC, the Association for Professionals in Infection Control and Epidemiology. There's SHEA, SHEA, the Society for Healthcare Epidemiology of America. There's the IDSA, the Infectious Disease Society of America. NACHO, which is the National Association of County and City Health Officials. Not to be confused with ASTO, which is the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials. So at every level, you have your own organization of infectious disease and epidemiologists who are networking and exchanging information, all of whom rely on CDC for this information. And now they have to turn to blogging and social media and all the stuff I was in Washington in 2008 and 9 to teach them how to do, because I told them that their federal systems were just too slow. And nothing's changed. So at least they've learned how to do that. And so that's why it's not quite as bad. But Epidemiolakshmi says, listen, lab-confirmed COVID cases are reported to local health, but the data reported in the NHSN to CDC is hospitalization, patient acuity, ICU beds, ventilators, ECMO usage, extracorporeal, that's where you circulate blood and oxygenated off a ventilator, and preparedness, like whether or not you have enough personal protective equipment for medical people. That's what's missing. And if CDC doesn't get this data, the administration will downplay severity of the epidemic. They'll claim they're still getting it, but then Mike Pence will come out and tell you everything's fine, like he did a month ago when he wrote that there's not going to be a second wave. Of course, there isn't, because we never got out of the first wave, and it's pretty bad. And a week ago, when he was on TV as part of the task force, explained to us everything was just fine, when in fact it's not. So that's the worry. So she goes on to say, state departments of health and hospital associations and major health systems need to call this out. APIC, SHEA, the American Public Health Association, IDSA, NACHO, Rich Besser and Tom Frieden, the former directors of CDC, the Journal of the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine, everybody, they need to call out and say, this is wrong. We have to fix this.
Okay. Anytime now, guys.
So there's a lot of reporting about this is happening. Many large health systems have been reporting this on behalf of individual hospitals. A facility level leadership may not be aware of the minutia. So in an individual hospital, they feed that to the system that owns them, and it's the system that gives it to the state. And so you lose this overall, 20,000 feet picture when you don't have that data. And that includes how many beds are occupied, how many patients are on ventilators, and all the other stuff. The true picture of U.S. hospital capacity. And NHSN is the system we've used to report a hospital-acquired infection for years. This module, the coronavirus, was added in April that allowed for hospital capacity and resource usage to be collected and shared for use in public health emergencies. It's missing, and the public health people are really angry about it. That's basically what I'm trying to tell you with this whole situation here.
Okay, well, they were already angry.
She points out Assistant Secretary Caputo at HHS states CDC just can't keep up with the data because only 85% of hospitals use the system. But real talk, CDC has made mistakes in this response, but that's due to Trump administration sidelining the efforts. So the hospital administration the administrators are also angry with this because that's the system they use.
Yeah. All right.
While the NBC News article states that CDC, per Caputo, will still make the data public, my concern from this epidemiologist is that CDC isn't the first point of contact, and contractors and HHS analysts are.
Yes.
Now, this only affects acute care facilities, skilled nursing facilities, or SNFs, or nursing homes. They're still reporting.
NHs, yes.
So SNFs, SNFs, data will still be reported, not teletracking, which is the fly-by-night HHS parallel system that was set up that they're moving to.
All right. Yeah, I'm starting to get lost in this one.
Right. So the whole
That's
idea is, if you step back and look at the big picture, CDC, remember we said yesterday, CDC relies on faxing. A lot of the stuff that they do is outmoded and it's awkward and it's clunky, but it still worked. And in their infinite wisdom, the Trump administration decided the best thing to do was award a huge contract, no bid contract to a place called teletracking so that they would do parallel tracking to what the CDC was using. And nobody's quite sure how it works or who's making money off of it or whether or not it's as effective. But HHS has decided that it's okay. So they're going to use that.
Does Caputo own it? Okay.
It's unclear who owns it.
Great.
But basically what they're trying to do is privatize the system.
All right. That's never a problem.
And this is their way of doing this. Plus, it not only fits in with their philosophy, it also allows them to control the data and how it's released.
Yes. Right. That's the word.
And that's political.
Yeah.
As an example of that, in the state of Florida right now, there are concerns that the data that's being fed in terms of what's going on with the pandemic isn't quite accurate. That's been true for a long time. But now the Orlando Sun-Sentinel reported that they're even having trouble figuring out whether or not it's accurate in terms of what they consider to be the percent positive of the tests. That's important because when you start to get more testing than you can handle, and the turnaround time is 7 to 10 days, then the rapid rise in test results turning positive may not be correct.
Oh.
If you don't get your test result for 10 days, how do you know what's really going on today versus yesterday?
Sure.
So one way to check is, okay, well, like in New York back in early April, if there's more people with the illness than you can test for, then the people you do test should have a relatively high percentage positive.
Yeah.
Like if 3% of your tests are positive, then there's not a lot in your community. But if 40% of your tests are positive, or 50 like it was in New York at one point, that's telling you that it's like all over.
Yes.
Okay. And right now, what's being reported for Florida, let me just plug this Florida in to give you an idea. California, for Florida right now, 18.8% is positive, but that may be a low estimate.
All right.
So if cases appear to be stabilizing, which in Florida it hasn't yet.
Yeah, 18.8
but
is
you're
out of control.
very high. You want to be less than 10.
Yeah.
If you are 18.8% and increasing positive rate, it means there's more virus in the community than positive tests alone are telling you. The number of tests.
Yes. Okay.
Right. And so Florida is on the upswing. Arizona is at 24%, but going down.
Okay.
And their number of cases are decreasing, but it's still not clear with that high number of 24 whether Arizona's plateaued and starting to drop. There are some suggestions, some hints that might be the case. Falsely claimed by Birx and Pence last week that was happening, but this week we might actually see some of that. But the deaths in Arizona are about to go up. And until we have a longer trend of data, and that's why CDC uses 14 days, not 1 or 2, we still don't know quite what's going on. So there's reason to doubt the numbers, but the numbers still aren't looking good. And basically, the lag time with deaths means that this is July 16th, and by the end of July, beginning of August, we're expecting deaths to actually go up quite a bit.
Okay.
Right. So don't take solace in the fact that things seem to be stabilizing. That's happy talk. We don't know that yet.
Yeah. No, I don't know even who's. Well, I guess
Birx and
Birx
Pence are saying it.
Right, but I don't listen to them. I listen to you saying not to listen to them.
Well, yeah. So I sent you other pretty pictures showing the deaths from COVID-19 per day, with Arizona spiking. But some of those Arizona deaths actually happened a while back. New confirmed COVID cases per day, normalized by population. Florida's in the lead right now. Arizona may have stabilized, but we'll see. The last day was a little bit less than the day before. That day was higher than the day before that, so we'll see. Texas is still not clear, and California is still not clear. So hopefully those states, having taken steps, will start to see some drop in that. But there's still going to be a 2-week lag time before people are in the hospital, and from there, 3-week lag time before people die. So every time you do something that's correct, it takes a month to really see it.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the Wall Street Journal just highlighting that. Hospitals and COVID-19 hotspots are filling up. Patients are stranded in emergency rooms, transferred between facilities. A surge in coronavirus cases pushes hospitals in Texas, Arizona, and Florida near capacity. That's what's happening now, and that's why the hospitalization rate is the single most important thing you can look at to get an idea of what's really going on right now. And that's why people are so mad at cutting CDC out of that.
Yeah. Right, so now what?
Now what? Well, then you have Governor Kemp in Georgia explicitly voiding local mask mandates.
Yes.
You have Ducey refusing to have a statewide mandate. You have Abbott in Texas veering between shutting down more and not allowing locals to make their own decisions.
Okay.
And then you have the school push.
Right.
So all of that is happening at the same time,
really, honestly.
and none of it is good.
No, none of it. Well.
And that gets back to what our first segment was about, which is why the numbers for Trump are as bad as they are. You can't hide that stuff.
No.
It doesn't make people feel good about going back to school. No. And in fact, there was a slew of polls yesterday, and I can't even remember whether we covered it on the show. I think we did, but there were even more that came out. Basically, people are not ready to send their kids. They're not ready to sacrifice their kids for Trump's reelection.
Yeah, that's a sensitive issue, to say the least. Yeah, I don't know anybody who's super comfortable with it, and a lot of states are beginning to think about backing off a bit or beefing up their distance learning, as they probably should have been doing during the whole time that the kids were out of school, plus the summer. But I don't know, everybody sort of thought everything would be fine somehow. I remember maybe the heat was going to kill it or something. But
yeah, there's that dog having a cup of coffee in the burning cafe.
Yeah,
it's
right.
fine.
The heat, see?
The heat is it's fine.
This is fine because it kills the virus.
This is fine.
Yes. All right. Well, I don't know what else.
The largest school systems are saying we're not doing it.
Yeah.
And so Trump is losing that battle, and he's losing the battle of public opinion, and he's losing the battle in the polls, and he's going to lose the election. And so that's my summary for today.
All right. And I did see earlier, I think Joan was tweeting a little while ago, Mitch McConnell's making that his red line, which seems like maybe a bad political choice, that he's going to hold the line.
Now he's going to force schools to open.
Yeah, no more coronavirus aid anywhere.
He said,
unless
Mitch McConnell did, people are more afraid of not going back to school than they are of the virus, which is the exact opposite of what the polls said. So they can try to gaslight you. It's not working.
He's so savvy, and he's such a master politician.
That he's going to lose the Senate.
Yeah. Right. Well, okay. Just remember it's the opposite of what he says. That is very, it's really amazing. I mean, there's nothing more basic that will trigger angry responses. I don't know. Between that and the deliberate undermining of the masking mandates where local authorities, I don't know what happened.
And Tony Fauci. I mean, it's all organized, and none of it is working.
Okay. Yeah. Well, fire Brad Parscale. See if that helps.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. I don't know whether that makes a difference. Do we think? I mean, does anybody have any idea about whether Stepien is like? Is he in meetings saying, "Yeah, this stuff isn't going to work. We can't be threatening people"?
No. He's in meetings saying, "I'm the straw that stirs the drink."
I guess. I don't know. I mean, how else do you get hired in Trump world, right? It has to be. I'll be very interested to see this, and very interested to see. I guess someone should ask Chris Christie what he makes of this.
Well, he does not think a lot of Stepien. But again, I go back to something I said a long time ago, and that is that you cannot overestimate how stupid these people are.
Oh, that is difficult to do.
It's a big part of what they're doing.
I can't seem to
get
ahead of it.
And remember, Jared is running everything.
Yes, right. That's true. Which is another question as to maybe that helps explain it, right? If Stepien and Christie are at odds these days, maybe that's what excites Jared Kushner about hiring him, to stick it to Christie.
I have a moment, before the end of the segment, a very short piece from Connie Schultz.
All right.
And I was 6 years old, right after first grade had ended. My teacher invited my mother and me to her home. It turns out she went to the home. She got an award for being a great kid. And then as she was preparing to leave, the teacher whispered, "You're a very smart little girl. Let the grown-ups worry about grown-up problems." And her secret message is, teachers never come close to making what they earn, but they're just so valuable. This is a grown-up problem. It's ours to solve. The teachers need us.
All right. Let's kill them. Send me that, please, and I'll include it. And thanks very much for wrapping things up. We'll see you on Monday.
Okie dokie.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see. Trying to grab onto some things that might make some interesting reading, but when it's done on the fly, it's difficult to integrate it into the program. But making note, now I need to get back to, let's circle around, I guess, back to the Politico piece and see what the hell is up with Alyssa Slotkin. This is an important question in our minds. It's not Abigail. She ain't no Abigail Spanberger, but Alyssa Slotkin usually right in that same sweet spot, I think. And, we'll take a look at what's going on here. This is, again, Politico magazine. Alyssa Slotkin sounding the alarm. Will Democrats listen? She helped win Congress for the Democrats in 2018. Now she has a warning for her party. This got me in, eye roll mode. Oh God, here come. I don't know why I checked. I guess I was looking to see, is it, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. And is this another one of those things where the Democratic swing seat moderates are going to lecture us all to do the exact opposite of everything we've been told would work, or everything, I guess everything that we feel would work, and and basically give us a Democrats in disarray story or something like that. And it doesn't look like that. And I tried to skim a significant portion of it before the show, but it's not overly long, but it's a big piece. Let's check it out, and I'll give you the flavor of what's going on and see why I'm, maybe you'll be as astonished as I am. When one of Alyssa Slotkin's staffers passed along a New York Times report alleging that Russia had put bounties on the heads of American troops in Afghanistan, they did, and that President Donald Trump either did not consume the relevant intelligence or did not act upon it, my stomach, the Michigan congresswoman says, dropped to my knees. That's not the way I've never really heard it put that way, but okay. But my stomach dropped. You get the idea. Slotkin spent the next 72 hours in an incredulous haze. A veteran CIA analyst before coming to Congress in a Democratic wave of 2018, she thought she had seen it all. She had served at length in the Middle East, lost friends, and gained top secret clearance. She had, that's the summation of her life. Okay, she had personally briefed both George W. Bush and Barack Obama in the White House Situation Room and in the Oval Office on grave national security threats, and yet Slotkin's imagination could not stretch far enough to accommodate either of the two scenarios now confronting her. How could something so sensitive not reach the president? Or if it had, how could it have been ignored? The answer, of course, president's a effing moron and will do exactly the wrong thing. Count on it. The Congresswoman inhaled every bit of news coverage, watching carefully for conflicting details or any confirmation of the original Times story. She called former colleagues in the intel community in search of explanations. Finally, she took to social media, writing a series of uncharacteristically pointed tweets about Trump and Russian strongman, very strongly strongman, Vladimir Putin. Something has been off about that relationship since the beginning, she wrote. I'm with you. And Americans are quite literally paying in blood for his pandering to Putin. Yes, tell me more. I'm interested. I'm on I'm on the Slotkin page here. What's happening? The irony was not lost on Slotkin. See, that is ironic. Here she was, 4 months out from Election Day, one of the most endangered Democrats in the country, representing a district Trump carried by 7 points, spending her Sunday morning doing precisely what she had vowed to avoid, picking a Twitter fight with the President of the United States. There will be consequences. Of this, Slotkin is certain. She cannot hope to win re-election this fall without persuading a significant number of voters in Michigan's 8th congressional district, hers obviously, to split their tickets. 4 more years for Trump, 2 more years for her, and every feud with the White House is equivalent to a few more straight party ballots being punched. Right? She needs people to have split their tickets, and every time she fights with Trump over something, anything, she thinks that just drives people who are still Trump supporters to just say, to hell with it. Trump and a Republican for Congress. I mean, it seemed pretty hopeless, quite honestly, and I don't know. I mean, it seems like setting your sights low. Like, why? I understand why you got to hope for some ticket splitting, but I mean, I don't know if I would aim at it and say, how about switching your ticket? But I guess if you're a Trump supporter, you're just lost, at least on the question of Trump. But it's amazing that there's this idea that, well, we can probably get them to vote for a Democrat for Congress. That seems impossible to me, but it happened once. Anyway, let's go on here. Whether Slotkin can have it both ways, speaking her mind about the president and winning over some of his supporters, may well determine not only her fate, but the fate of Democrats in swing districts and battleground states across the country. Slotkin didn't want it to be this way. She envisioned another hyper-local campaign like the one she ran in 2018, building consensus around kitchen table issues and eluding perceptions of partisanship. But if her first 2 years in Congress taught her anything, we're not sure whether it did or not, it's that sooner or later everyone has to pick a side. There is no middle ground when it comes to Donald Trump. He's forcing my hand, Slotkin tells me a day after the tweet storm, resignation dripping from her voice. He's doing things and saying things that call upon me to think about my fundamental oath of office. In 2018, even as the national water cooler was dominated by talk of Trump, that really should have been the national water cooler talk was dominated by discussion of Trump, some Democratic congressional challengers ran campaigns predicated on a strategic belief that only by ignoring the elephant in the Oval Office could they flip red districts nationwide. This idea was not so much to wish Trump out of existence as to avoid the inevitable sting associated with siding with or against the most polarizing man in America. Rather than alienate progressives or offend conservatives, Slotkin and company ran a collective do-no-harm campaign, focusing insistently on job creation, on expanding health insurance, and lowering costs, on working in a bipartisan way to lower the volume in Washington. Ah, so nice. They anchored their candidacies with sterling resumes that drew from experiences in business and national security, forcing Republicans to play defense in parts of the country they had controlled for generations. And it worked. Democrats seized control of the House of Representatives, flipping dozens of seats like hers in southeast Michigan that were ripe for political realignment. Or at least temporarily, anyway. Stitching together a coalition that centered around suburban women, good idea, right? Disaffected Republicans and mortified independents, both. Slotkin, once viewed as a sacrificial lamb against Mike Bishop, the GOP incumbent, pulled away for a nearly 4 percentage point victory in a district Republicans had controlled for all of the 21st century. Emboldened, Slotkin and her fellow freshmen felt certain they had fashioned a blueprint. They would come to Washington but not succumb to its one-character drama. It would be their responsibility to serve as a check on the executive, of course, but these incoming legislators believed they would do their jobs and keep their jobs with a relentless focus on the real issues affecting their constituents back home. They would not allow Trump to dictate how they went about their work in Congress or on the campaign trail. 2 years later, it all sounds so naive, which is a remarkable thing to say about, I think, about Slotkin or those like her, those we lump in the same category, the Abigail Spanberger category, right? It's amazing because, well, I mean, to be honest, weren't most of the people we know sitting around saying, God, this, when they were saying it 2 years ago, oh, this is the formula for success, we all said, this seems so naive in the face of someone as destructive and reckless and whatever, as Trump. And, you know, of course, that was dismissed because, you know, the important muckety-mucks of political punditry said, don't you see, they won in Trump districts. They flipped it. They're the ones responsible for winning back the House, not the 200 and something seats, you know, or nearly 200 seats that you had already and were likely to keep, but the 24 or so that made the difference. I mean, a difference is a difference. You got to respect that. But I mean, you do have a base of something near 200 seats, and why not focus on respecting that from time to time? I mean, without that, while it's true, without the additional difference, you might not flip the House. But I guess if you just focus on those flippable ones and abandon everybody else, well, then your 200 goes away. And that seems like a bigger problem than the 24. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that, you know, for the last, or the bulk of the last 2 years, it's been considered hopelessly naive to say that their approach to how they did their jobs was hopelessly naive. Now we find out Politico magazine is come to an agreement with Alyssa Slotkin to tell everybody that all of you idiots who thought that the way to do this was to avoid confrontation with Donald Trump are hopelessly naive. We, the smart ones, have figured it out. and we, the rest of us who've been listening to the show, are saying, but I feel it's, and then, you know, and there's some instinct, I guess, to say, go with it. Let them feel like they're geniuses and that they came to this on their own. The rookie members of Congress were sworn in during a government shutdown of the president's design, and they realized very quickly they were merely the newest cast members on the Trump show, forced into roles as the disloyal opposition that he defined for them. They would not be broadly evaluated by their efforts to regulate prescription drug costs or their contributions to campaign finance reform. In normal times, individual efforts might have gained more traction in D.C., might have broken through the noise back home, might have influenced the perceptions of a legislator among her constituents, but these were not normal times. And also, probably they really weren't going to work very well. Everything of significance that has transpired in the 116th Congress. Oversight hearings with Trump allies and officials, reactions to Robert Mueller's probe of Russian meddling in 2016, the Ukraine inquiry, and subsequent impeachment proceedings, economic stabilization efforts to offset the impact of COVID-19, proposals to reform policing in America. All best understood through the prism of Trump, his vice grip on America's collective political subconscious, and his campaign to win re-election. Politically, nothing else matters. This isn't to say members of Congress won't be assessed on their performance, but rather to say that the performance itself has almost everything to do with their relationship to Trump and their skill in navigating the minefields of his presidency. Which brings us to Slotkin. Few members of Congress arrived in Washington with more nonpartisan street cred than the 42-year-old former intelligence analyst who served 3 tours in Iraq, who married a respected Army officer turned Pentagon advisor, and who never gave any whiff of political leanings until posting the news of her run for Congress in the summer of 2017. Friends called with alarm, thinking her Facebook account had been hacked. It's the type of background that traditionally would have insulated a lawmaker from accusations of partisanship. But in the case of Slotkin, it's that very background that has compelled her time and again to censure Trump in a way that inevitably is viewed as partisan, even though it's just flat out correct. I mean, I guess maybe this feels like, yeah, duh, sort of a thing, because I have that experience already. Back when it was discussion of impeachment of George W. Bush for indefinite detention of enemy combatants, of the awarding himself the unilateral power to declare people to be terrorists, use of torture, the use of warrantless surveillance of Americans, etc., etc., and calling for his impeachment. The wizened heads in Washington said, we can't have this kind of partisanship in the face of what was then his enormous and growing popularity and sympathy in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, and besides which, Why Do You Hate America was a fantastic attack on all of us as well. It was just working oh so well. It was. But the idea of impeaching or discussing the impeachment of George W. Bush was dismissed as a partisan. It has to be partisan. He's a Republican. You're a Democrat. It must be partisan why you would advocate for his impeachment. And of course, it was based on exactly the same thing that brought everybody around to deciding they finally had to impeach Donald Trump as well. My duty to the Constitution. There's too many constitutional norms and guardrails being smashed through here. We have to put something on the record. And this time it worked. Last time it didn't. But, all right, so 15 years later, Alyssa Slotkin comes to the realization that, yeah, there are some things you just have to do as a elected representative in a constitutional republic. Otherwise, it's not worth being an elected member of the legislature in a constitutional republic. So you got no choice. All right, but here we are. In the case of Slotkin, that very background compelled her time and again to censure Trump in a way that inevitably is viewed as partisan, even though it isn't, is what I would add to that. That's my story. Take the Russian bounties scandal. When I spoke with her over the phone 3 days after the story broke, she had just been informed that she would visit the White House the next morning for a classified briefing. It made sense that Steny Hoyer, the House Majority Leader charged with leading a select crew of Democrats down Pennsylvania Avenue, would bring Slotkin along. She deserved to be there. She wanted to be there. And yet being there meant not doing constituent calls. Being there meant skipping other meetings relevant to her district. Being there and agreeing to appear on television as a serious, sober-minded, non-bomb-throwing spokesperson for the Democratic Party meant talking for most of the week about Trump rather than about water quality fixes or defense authorization amendments or any number of other things she'd been consumed with. Once again, Trump is blocking out the sun. Slotkin has come to terms with that reality. She knows that she, like every other candidate on the ballot this fall, is campaigning in his shadow, and yet she holds out hope that just enough voters will measure her merits as an individual that she will be judged by metrics other than her allegiance to the president or lack thereof. Late last year, I was asked every single day for 3 months, especially on TV, MSNBC, CNN, Fox. They all asked me, do you think you're going to lose your job over this? Slotkin recalls, thinking back to her reluctant starring role in the impeachment of Trump. And I said, I might, but I believe that voters in my state and my district still care about having elected officials with integrity, even if they don't agree with them. Slotkin barely pauses, but we're going to find out. Somewhere on the 400-acre Slotkin family farm in Holly, Michigan, up over Verdant Hills, past the hulking pole barn where Alyssa exchanged vows with Dave Moore, the dirt and gravel driveway no longer in sight, I ask a basic question. If the election were today, would she win? Slotkin stops walking. Brushing away wisps of brown hair from her forehead, the Congresswoman's knuckles linger against her temple as she looks past me, silently, for a full 11 seconds, this is very detailed, as if trying to solve a math equation in her mind. It is a math equation. How many votes do you get? If the election was held today, before I've really gotten to work for it, she finally manages. Another long pause. I don't know. Well, okay. That's not that interesting. She computes some more. I think probably I would win, but for me, it's really important to have neighbors talking to neighbors, and we haven't been able to do as much of that. And then, a candid assessment. I think, without doing the work, a smart person's money should be on a Republican candidate. I can't take anything for granted given how this district was built. 15 minutes south of Flint and an hour northwest of Detroit, Holly is a quiet, scenic settlement, the sort of everyman's resort town where people camp in the summer and ski in the winter. The Slotkin name is royalty here. Hugo Slotkin, who ran the family business, High Grade Food Products, that's Hygrade, bought the farm in 1956. That's not when he died. That's when he actually purchased the land that became the farm. The year before his company gained eternal fame with the creation of the Ballpark Frank. You know those things, they plump when you cook them, right? For Tiger Stadium in Detroit. Now we know. Okay, very interesting. His granddaughter, Alyssa, was born in New York, but her mother's breast cancer diagnosis forced the family to move to Michigan when she was 4. I guess so they could spend all their money on cancer treatment and live at the parents' place. Raised between the farm and some nearby suburbs after her parents' divorce, Slotkin says Holly was always home base, the rallying point for her family, where she and Dave live today, along with their 2 dogs and, temporarily, a cousin and his wife. Even so, Holly, like the rest of Slotkin's district, is a house divided, a house with a foundation that leans slightly, but not noticeably, to the right. She won 2 of Holly's 4 precincts in 2018, but the total vote from her hometown was Bishop. 2,588 for Bishop, 2,243 for Slotkin. Royalty, but not that much. The war for the White House in 2020 will come down to a series of smaller battles waged on unique fronts across the country, not simply the statewide level, but inside the towns, counties, and congressional districts where the demographic trends are sharpest and the turnout margins are tightest. It is in these places, from the emerging sun-drenched barrios of Phoenix to the historic and prosperous neighborhoods of northeastern Philadelphia to the quaint, overlooked suburban meets rural communities like Holly, the control of the White House and likely the Senate and House of Representatives will ultimately be decided. That's my cue, I think, I'm going to have to either jump out of this article or find a section that's more relevant to where I want to. I found out the very interesting fact that Slotkin clearly knows that she's going to have to defend confrontation with Trump as part of her campaign. But I've just read a paragraph that says that the war for the White House will come down to a series of smaller battles waged in urban districts and then some suburban ones and also some rural ones. Like, yeah, America. Thank you. That was really not very, I'm criticizing the writing style, but that was just a waste of time. Let's see. Let me see whether I'm more interested in what does she have to say about what's going on with Trump and national security issues, and how does she plan to walk that tightrope? And it's not here just so far. Let's see. And then discussion of the way the district is built and lots of pictures, and looks like a nice enough place. Anyway, I think maybe we just jump out of the story here, and I'll recommend the rest of it to your own reading. And I'm sure it's fascinating background, and we'll get some idea of what's going on here. Oh, look, here's a picture down here. Who's in this photo? Is that? They don't identify everybody in this photo as well. It looks like is she in a picture with Abigail Spanberger here? Let's see. It just mentions her and doesn't say who else is there, but that's my guess. And they're all behind masks, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to tell. All right. Well, let's jump out of this article. I just thought that was really interesting as a as a piece of news about Slotkin and the eye-rolling headline actually turning out to be something different. So I guess here's my question is, where in this article is the headline question answered? Essentially, I mean, the headline of the piece was, Alyssa Slotkin is sounding the alarm. Will Democrats listen? What is the alarm? I mean, we're well over halfway through the text here, and I don't see what the alarm is, and no indication of whether anybody thinks anybody is going to listen to this. So anyway, I just thought it was very interesting that it turned out that the alarm wasn't the one I thought. What is it? I still don't know. But if I spend the rest of the show pursuing it, I have a feeling we'll end very disappointed. Okay, let me get to some other pieces of news here. Maybe we'll segue a little bit by going to another intelligence-related story. This one from Business Insider, and I guess some of the practical fallout of the things Slotkin worries about. Russia used Trump's intelligence sharing to try to assassinate Chechen dissidents in Europe, sources say. This is just sort of a brass tacks kind of story about the dangers of the way the Trump administration handles Russia and intelligence. Things we guessed might be happening, but with some, specific detail here. Things to point to later. Mitch Prothero, I hope I've pronounced it right, is the author of this piece for Business Insider. And it goes like this. Russia routinely exploited a U.S. policy, a Trump policy, really, of increased information sharing with Russia to target Chechen dissidents, according to 3 law enforcement and intelligence officials in Europe. The practice emerged after the Trump administration backed the policy of sharing more secret information with Russia in the hopes of strengthening relations. I mean, it's the sort of thing that you could legitimately pitch if you had stronger national security credentials, and it's within the prerogative of the presidency to do this stuff. Of course, we've also discussed that, technically it's within the prerogative of the presidency to say, we're just going to have outright, back to this theme, political union with Russia. We're just going to share our intelligence with them because they are us and we're them. Now, we haven't quite gotten to that point, but it has worried people for a long time what this might mean, and some of the reactions have been hinted at in the past. The practice emerged, again, for what might be arguably legitimate reasons. I want us to have closer relations. Well, how close is the real question, and is this really the best way to do it? Couldn't we just have better trade relationship, right? Sources told Business Insider, Russia routinely sought information on its targets of choice, dissidents who fled the rule of Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov. I don't know where the emphasis falls on that, but Kadyrov, Kadyrov. The U.S. appears to have received little in return. That's the basic statement of the problem here. Let's have a national security information sharing agreement with the Russians to bring about closer relations. I hate the expression open the kimono, but I guess it might work here. We'll share our sensitive intelligence with you in your pursuit of your own national security issues. So supposedly, I would guess that probably the plan was so long as the national security isn't the ultimate defeat of the United States. But as it turns out, it is. You have, for instance, we can share intelligence and have a closer relationship over combating international terrorism. That's the cover story, and it always has been the cover story for why you would do something like this. Our thought, I guess, was the justifying thought was maybe they'll tell us information about where we can find ISIS or Al-Qaeda operatives through their channels. They happen to have found that out. They'll tell us, and we'll go kill them, and then they'll be able to use our information to go kill the top threats to their national security. And I guess we were supposed to believe that they too felt that ISIS and Al-Qaeda were the top threats to them, but they don't. They might sometimes say they do if they need to cooperate with us or get approval among American electorate for an approval or information sharing idea like this. But really, the truth is they view Chechen rebels, who are also Muslim rebels, they view them as maybe they're really their only interest in fighting international terrorism. It's not international, it's domestic terrorism to them. And so, anyway, they made tremendous use of the system to get information out of us about whatever we might know about the whereabouts of Chechen rebels, and offered us very little in return. What a surprise. What a great deal our great deals president has made. It is an open secret, it says here, that Russia pursues Chechen dissidents and kills them, and sometimes seeks Western help in doing so. We've been giving that out and getting nothing in return. Surprise. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with this story. I mean, I do think it's off our chosen topic usually, but I think this gets to some good hard information and some brass tacks here if we believe our sources. The official's insider, Business Insider, remember this is their story, confirmed the existence of the modern-day U.S.-Russian arrangement after a former U.S. intelligence official described it on the Just Security blog. So that is linked here to Ryan Goodman's piece at Just Security entitled "Trump Pushed CIA to Give Intelligence to Kremlin While Taking No Action Against Russia Arming Taliban," not to mention paying the Taliban to kill American soldiers. Just sort of an interesting perspective on all of this. And yeah, why would the Russian government think it could get away with paying bounties to the Taliban to kill American soldiers? Goodman asks, and just quickly, he'll say one answer to that question may be the extraordinary response that Moscow received when the Trump administration learned of a precursor to the bounty operation. From mid-2017 and into 2018, Pentagon officials became increasingly confident in intelligence reports that the Kremlin was arming the Taliban, which posed a significant threat to American and coalition forces on the ground in Afghanistan. President Trump's actions in the face of this Russian Taliban arms program likely signaled weak U.S. resolve in the eyes of Putin and Russian military intelligence. 3 dimensions of Trump's response are described in detail in this article based on interviews with several former Trump administration officials who spoke to Just Security on the record. We won't go into that just yet, though it may end up we follow up this other piece with this, but basically laying out the case that they went ahead, armed the Taliban, and just sort of indirectly did what they wanted to do. Why don't you guys use these weapons to kill Americans? And the response was so weak that they said, we might actually be able to just up the ante a little bit, not just give them weapons, but actually pay them bounties to kill Americans just to incentivize it. Let's try it and see what the Americans have to say about it. And the answer to that was also nothing. So that's interesting. Right. So these officials then decided to speak with Business Insider when they, I guess, once they read the confirmation not only of the bounties being paid, but of the analysis that, yeah, the bounties are being paid because nobody reacted to the weapons situation. Well, anyway, going on here, I guess one of the officials said the intelligence officials considered it pointless, but pursued it anyway on the orders of the Trump administration. That is this new intelligence sharing arrangement. It's not going to bring about closer relations, but the boss says he wants it. He's supposedly the president, and something constitution and now we're stuck. We have to do it. There was a consistent push for CT cooperation with Moscow. That's counterterrorism. Consistent push for counterterrorism cooperation with Moscow, coming from the White House, despite near universal belief within the intelligence community that this effort would be one-sided and end up being a waste of time and energy. The former U.S. official, this is Mark, look at it, Polymeropoulos, I'm guessing is how you would say that name. It's like polymer, the word we know and love, and the surname suffix that we're familiar with in Greek culture, Apollos, Polymeropoulos. So Mark Polymeropoulos is the name of the official who says, we all had concerns about this. Trump had this idea in mind that we could cooperate on counterterrorism with the Russians, but nobody in the intelligence community believed it. The deal led to the arrests of several people accused of planning attacks in St. Petersburg, the Daily Beast reported. However, insiders' sources said Russia's attempt to uphold its side of the bargain was one-sided and self-serving. All three sources spoke on condition of anonymity, I guess except for Polymeropoulos, because they did not have permission to discuss the subject publicly. Insider knows their identities. The sources said most of the information that came from the Russians as help was thinly veiled requests for information on the whereabouts of Chechen and other Muslim Russian dissidents. So interesting. They were paying us back with information, and the information was, will you give us more information? That's not, how was that even, I don't know what to do. But this reminded me of the way the Russians had been using Interpol red notices. They basically entered into a fake counterterrorism information sharing deal with Trump for whatever reason, and then just gamed that to also try and glean information about where were the dissidents that they wanted to assassinate. The dissidents in question had fled the decade-long wars in and around Chechnya to claim asylum in Europe. A French police source told Insider, the Russians regularly abuse the process of sharing information by spamming us with notices about people that they know perfectly well are under police protection because of their threats against them. The official, who spoke on condition of anonymity because he didn't have permission to brief the media, is investigating the stabbing death of Imran Aliyev, an anti-Putin and anti-Kadyrov blogger who lived under police protection in Belgium. He said, the Russian mentality is that any Chechen who wants independence from Moscow or opposes Kadyrov is an Islamic extremist terrorist just the same as ISIS and needs to be killed. And I don't know. I mean, I suppose at one level it's hard to argue. Like, we declare ISIS and Al-Qaeda to be Muslim extremist terrorists who must be killed, and it's our right to do it. And sometimes we cut corners on doing it. So it's hard to object when the Russians say, oh, yeah, well, we think Chechens are exactly the same. I'm not sure why, what the basis for objection is, really. But that doesn't mean we need to cooperate with them. Anyway, they say it's this French official, I think, says it's a mix of phishing, intimidation, and setting an atmosphere to make it easier to pressure someone else to turn them over later. It also allows an alibi for them to shrug when they end up murdered. More than a dozen Chechen activists have been killed in Europe since 2004, with Russian or Chechen suspects linked to either Russian intelligence or Kadyrov's forces in multiple cases. Another NATO military intelligence official who regularly deals with Russian intelligence matters confirmed the nature of Russia's activity. He said NATO, this is another key part here, he said NATO has limited some parts of its relationship with the U.S. because of its closeness to Russia. Specifically, some worried that U.S. officials would send the Russians their intelligence. So they're holding back on telling the United States, NATO allies, holding back on sharing information with the United States because the United States is so stupid about what it shares with Russia. They didn't want to see their hard-won intelligence handed over to the Russians like that. This official also spoke anonymously for the usual reasons. He said, I don't want to say we locked the Americans out, but we certainly noticed the very public leak of intelligence to the Russians in 2017. That's linked here to the Washington Post's 2017 coverage, title being, Trump revealed highly classified information to Russian foreign minister and ambassador. Everybody now remembers the visit of Sergei Kislyak and Sergei Lavrov to the White House. And that was even the meeting where he said, and I just fired Comey, and that really is what a huge relief that is, et cetera, et cetera. Plus, that was, I think, the meeting at which he spilled the beans about some Israeli operations as well, right? Anyway, this is why key protections of intelligence information are in place. You can't always count on your friends to keep secrets. The NATO official said Russia volunteered little useful information on Russians fighting in Syria. That's what they were after. Tell us the names of the Russians who are fighting on behalf of Assad in Syria, despite more of its citizens fighting in that war than any other non-Arab nation. He said Russia instead focused its energies on Chechen targets. If we have this good information sharing relationship and there's all these Chechen terrorists out there, why do we only get info and requests on bloggers and retired fighters from the 1990s? The official said. What about all these Chechens and Dagestanis in Idlib? That's a way I haven't focused on that at all. But at any rate, interesting point, right? Well, if you're really interested in Chechen terrorists, why not seek information about the whereabouts of actual Chechen terrorists as opposed to retired fighters and dissident bloggers? Why target them with assassination? It's very petty, it seems. Lots of these guys seem to have military training, the Chechens and Dagestanis. The Russians must have something on them. What about Malhama Tactical, which also I have no idea, but also linked. Here's the interesting, here's what it is. It's linked to a foreign policy piece entitled The Blackwater of Jihad. A consortium of elite, well-paid fighters from across the former Soviet Union are training jihadis in Syria. Their business model could go global. That does seem like a very dangerous possibility, don't you think? All right, well, I would recommend maybe reading that one over the weekend, too. It is linked in this Business Insider piece, and maybe I'll provide the link separately as well. A third source, an intelligence official with a Central European NATO member, also confirmed Russia's requests focus on Chechens. They use the intelligence sharing system like they've used Interpol, just as we said, right? It's a threat, he said. It's like the movie The Godfather. You have to spread the rumor to everyone that he's dirty before you kill him. That way everyone thinks he probably had it coming. They were talking there about the police sergeant. I think they didn't make that entirely clear, but I guess we're all just supposed to know. So interesting, using the Interpol red notices and this information sharing agreement to spread the idea that the people that they're after are particularly bad news and are terrorist related when they might just be dissident bloggers and nothing else. And of course, Trump, the great deal maker, going along with it. And as a result, NATO allies, the NATO alliance itself further undermined because it becomes less and less effective the less intelligence trusted or formerly trusted NATO members can share with one another. So another huge win for the Russian military intelligence operation headed very, very strongly by his favorite guy, Vladimir Putin. All right. Switching over to coronavirus news, we have a couple of bits and pieces for you. One being the note that the governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, made Twitter news yesterday. He's another one of the mask denialists, science denialists, pandemic denialists, who apparently made a big deal out of tweeting out a picture of him eating with his young kids and the rest of his family at a packed restaurant back in March 14th, eating with my kids and all my fellow Oklahomans at the Collective OKC, Oklahoma City. It's packed tonight. Support local, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, that's probably not where he got it. He, of course, was also spotted at the Trump rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Herman Cain and Kimberly Guilfoyle and a bunch of Secret Service agents and a bunch of advanced people from the campaign all got COVID-19, not to mention the entire state of Oklahoma, apparently, which now has its own spike going on. Well, a little over 2 weeks and just under, I think, 3 weeks from attending the rally, Kevin Stitt turns out, hey, he's positive for COVID-19. Isn't that weird? I saw Brandon Friedman put together this photo montage, one of Kevin Stitt's tweet, and then a CNN headline, Oklahoma governor who faced backlash over packed restaurant tweet now declares state of emergency. What do you know? And that was actually March 16th. He was in the restaurant on March 14th. By March 16th, he was declaring a public emergency. Not very smart. And then, of course, 15 July, we have Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt, a Republican and ally of President Trump, says he has tested positive for COVID-19. Let's use that to segue into something else that, oh, you know what? Well, first I have to make one more stop on the coronavirus front, but I'll remind myself of the segue I wanted to make. But this seems like important news. We were talking about test positivity and, of course, about opening schools, and we read you the story about what happened in Israel, and yet we still have people all over Twitter saying, kids can't get it, so what's the problem? Open the schools. The Hill is my source here, believe it or not, but let's see, are they just reporting someone else's outside work? No, this is a very glossy multimedia kind of presentation. Maybe it's their own work. Alexandra Kelly, the headline might be all you need. Almost 1/3 of Florida children tested are positive for the coronavirus. The state's outbreak continues to surge as new data reveal children may be more impacted than previously thought. And we've been talking about that storyline for a long time, but it's more been about, yeah, they can get it, and yeah, they can have a very unique reaction to the virus. Particularly I forget how they were. What was the very specific pediatric response that was very worrisome, and it was causing a lot of trouble for kids. But now, not so much about this very still somewhat rare reaction to the virus, but rather the fact that, yeah, an awful lot of kids can in fact get it and can in fact carry it, and the schools are going to be a nightmare, basically. Israel's experience says so. We'll give you the story at a glance in the bullet points here. State data show children in Florida have a 31.1% positivity rate for COVID-19 infections. This comes as teachers and local governments deliberate on how to reopen schools in the fall. Wow. Seems like that would maybe put a stop to things, but screw science and facts. We need to open, and we need to do it without masks. Ah, yes, it was the inflammatory Kawasaki disease that the reaction was similar to. I was trying to bring that name to mind. All right, well, I'll just give you that article. The headline is what you need out of that one. Just be aware of it. Keep an eye on it. I'll share it with you. You can read it. The segue I meant to make from the Kevin Stitt story was to this Twitter thread brought to my attention by someone a lot of us follow, Page 88, Virginia Heffernan, who's actually pointing me to someone else's very interesting and entertaining tweet thread. Just, it won't be hard news that we're analyzing here, just sort of I think a good way of illustrating a very serious point about maybe our uniquely American failure to confront this virus. As Scott Charles put it earlier this morning, I think his summation of it, let me grab it, I think it's up at the top of my own feed here, I know it's close. America, as he said, is failing an open book test that it has already taken, right? Not only are our normal volumes back up, but our COVID cases are climbing again, and the tents are going back up, the temporary field hospitals to deal with hospital overthrow. Failing an open book test. We know how to do this. And we've taken the test before in New York, and we're watching other countries take it and pass it, and somehow we're just unable to get our act together on this thing. So, Virginia Heffernan, pointing to the tweet thread of one Gabrielle Blair, with this introduction. The fact that the I stockpile IEDs, I might have gone with AR-15s here, I stockpile IEDs to protect my family crowd wants to start up school without mandatory masks. And it reminds me of this brilliant thread by the unstoppable Mormon mother of 6 Design Mom. That's the Twitter handle of Gabrielle Blair, which I think puts it very interestingly. Let me read down her thread here. When I hear men worshiping guns and talking about how there's nothing that will stop them from defending their family, she says, my mind goes to the Naaman story in the Bible. Do you remember Naaman? He was a great military leader, and he also had leprosy. That's not what reminds her of him, but it's an interesting story. My wife recalled it off the top of her head, as a matter of fact. Bit of a hazy mystery to me. But anyway, story goes like this. The prophet told him to bathe in the Jordan River 7 times in order to be cured of his leprosy, and he refused, interestingly. In fact, he was pissed off that the cure was so simple. Feels like a mask story here, right? So his servants said, if he'd asked you to do some great thing, you would have done it, but you're not willing to go bathe in the water? That's like men bragging about how they're ready and willing to protect their family. They're picturing doing some great thing. But protecting your family is almost always much more mundane. And she proposes a few imaginary conversations with God to illustrate the point. I bring this up as the reason that Stitt was a segue is Stitt falls very neatly into this category on both fronts, guns and actually doing something, in this case, to protect his family. The illustrative conversation should help clear things up. Conversation number 1 here. The man says, hey, God, I just want you to know I am committed to protecting my family at all costs, very strongly. I'm going to protect my family at all costs. And God says, gosh, that's great to hear. One of the main things you need to do to protect your family, like I did with Naaman, he needed to bathe in the river to cure his leprosy. I don't know if that will really work, but when God says it will in this book, right? One of the main things you need to do to protect your family is laundry. Tons of laundry. You know, kids, it makes a case for it here. They're so susceptible to infections and viruses like we have now, right? Pinworms, athlete's foot, lice, strep throat, colds, flus, pneumonia, and diarrhea. Very serious killers of children under 5. The list is endless, so you're going to need to do laundry pretty much daily. Launder their socks and underwear. Launder their sheets. Put their sneakers through the wash. I can't emphasize this enough. Protecting your family involves a lot of laundry. The man's reaction, of course, I was thinking more along the lines of a masked intruder with a gun at 2 a.m. raping my family. Got anything like that I could work on? And God's answer, first of all, stop fantasizing about your family being raped. Seek help about that, I really, honestly. Second, do you know the stats on break-ins? I do. I'm omnipotent. I know everything, right? The vast majority happen when no one is home and only a small percentage are ever armed. Home alarms and dogs reduce the risk even more. If you do end up in the rare house with an armed break-in while home, you want to shoot someone over your TV? Well, this one would be about raping the family, of course. Isn't that a ridiculous overreaction? You're not in a mob. I assure you, there's a slim to none chance you'll need to defend your family at gunpoint. They'll always find a story, but it's still, statistically, laundry would be better. And the man, of course, says, but if you really want to protect your family, God says, laundry is where I need you to focus. Of course, that's not going to interest any man, except I do all the damn laundry in my house. I'm a very manly man. I do the laundry. I wash all the dishes. I cook a lot of the food. I clean up all the food anyway. So, I'm doing a great job, but I have no AR-15s to do it with. The man says, but I bought all these guns and ammunition. I'm telling you, if anyone threatens my family, I'll be ready. God now says, is there anything you're willing to do to protect your family that's not the plot of an action thriller? Some blank lines here. And now, man, staring blankly. God, no response. Man, no response. God, sigh. Conversation number 2. Very similar. God says to the man, I'd like you to protect your family. The man says, you bet, I am ready. If anyone touches my kids, they are dead meat. Okay. Well, to protect your family, the thing I need you to do is teach thorough hand washing. Basically, you'll need to carefully wash your kids' hands several times a day until they're old enough to do it themselves. At that point, you'll need to supervise the hand washing for several years until you know they've mastered it. And from then on, you'll just need to spend another 10 years asking them to wash their hands multiple times a day, before school, after school, before meals, after potty breaks, etc. Cool? What do you think? The man says, well, is there an assignment that's more related to guns? Nope. The main thing is hand washing. Having guns in the house actually puts your kids in harm's way. Surely, as a protective parent, you've read about the dangers of keeping and storing guns at home, right? Not so much. Well, let me guess. If I need someone to dig a hole on an asteroid, plant the bomb in the hole and blow up the asteroid in order to save the Earth, you'll be first in line. The man says, heck yes. Okay, helpful. Conversation number 3. The man says, I'm ready to defend my family. My guns and ammunition are stocked. God responds, so glad to hear you're ready to defend your family. Here's the key thing I need you to do. Never drink alcohol again. Wait, what? Well, I'm sure you know motor vehicle accidents and gun accidents are the top killers of children. Mixing alcohol with driving or guns makes them far riskier. If you've been drinking, there's a higher likelihood you'll drive drunk or lose your temper and hurt the kids or just be irresponsible with your gun. So if you want to protect your family, I would recommend giving up alcohol as a good way to start. Man. God. Nothing. The man says, well, can't I just shoot some bad guys? God. So then, not actually interested in protecting your family. Conversation number 4. God asks, are you ready and willing to protect your family? The man says, yes, come at me. My house is fully armed and I keep a handgun under the passenger seat. I am ready. God says, oh, well, the thing I need you to do is feed your kids plenty of healthy food. Do the grocery shopping, plan the meals, stock the fridge, cook dinner, and of course, do the dishes and keep the kitchen clean because you don't want harmful bacteria taking over. The man says, but I don't even know how to cook. God says, how'd you learn about your weapons? YouTube. Well, are there any cooking videos on YouTube? Womp womp. That's the end of that conversation. And the end of all the conversations, as a matter of fact. She says, I'm often told that men have instincts to protect their family and how protector is their natural role. I think the case can be made more easily that men have zero natural instincts to protect their family. If such an instinct had evolved, why wouldn't men check back with any woman that they'd had sex with to see if they caused a pregnancy? For instance, how can we say men have an instinct to protect their family when there are children the world over with fathers who have no idea they exist? It's much easier to argue that mothers have a strong instinct to protect their families, and I think even most men will admit that, I think. But anyway, mothers still do the bulk, by far the bulk, of the parenting, which means mothers do the real things that actually protect their kids every day, all day long. Men demanding guns for their role as protector of the family are full of it. They are only willing to protect in make-believe instances that are never likely to happen. And when they're asked to actually protect their family by doing something like laundry, can't be bothered. Very interesting, and I thought very accurate, except for me, because reasons. But anyway, I don't know exactly what led me to that conclusion, but like I said, very interesting. It reminded me, I was reminded of it when I saw Kevin Stitt, because of course he's a big mouth when it comes to guns, and one of the things he was most proud of was one of his first acts as governor, signing constitutional carry into law in Oklahoma, and no doubt because it was all about protecting the family. So he too, just another one of these big-mouthed liars who say they want to protect their family, but won't do so much as keep them out of crowded restaurants during a pandemic, or wear a mask, at a gigantic rally or say maybe this gigantic rally isn't such a good idea. I will point out for the record that Kevin Stitt's picture does appear with him at the Tulsa rally right in the section where Herman Cain is sitting, except now the section where Herman Cain is sitting is the hospital ward, trying to get over his COVID-19 infection. And the very ancient Jim Inhofe is right behind him. Jim Inhofe, call your doctor's office, or, don't, whatever you want to do about that. I'm not saying I wish these bad things on you, but that's only because we're out of time. If we had more time, I would absolutely wish bad things on you. But now it falls to Justice Putnam to do the bad thing wishing with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I'm not certain he's going to do that, but I feel like it's a possibility. Here's in the news for him today. A Florida Republican state lawmaker who has filed numerous lawsuits against mask mandates says Florida's doing just fine, despite data showing, of course, that the state is an epicenter of coronavirus. You knew that, of course. We'll find out what else
Daily
is on tap
Coos
after
Radio
this.
on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
How about this? A DHS auditor did not employ any medical professionals when his office cleared U.S. border agents of wrongdoing in the deaths of 2 Guatemalan children. 23 attorneys general sued Betsy DeVos for blocking student loan forgiveness, and Los Angeles is in an alarming and dangerous phase as virus cases surge.